We're just starting the fourth chapter of Sotah, and we're going to go through a list of exceptions. Exceptions, these are women who don't drink the water. And actually, these are quite familiar to us, actually, from previous chapters. Interestingly, there's a lot of repetition about these categories in the Mishnah of Sotah. Maybe it's not as analytically perfect or as well ordered as other orders of the Mishnah. Anyway, for whatever reason, we've seen these categories before they're repeated, and the Mishnah now is going to derive them from a verse. So we're going to bring what feels like a halachic midrash at the beginning of the fourth chapter. And by the way, as we get into the fifth chapter, we'll get into a list of all kinds of other teachings. So maybe we're in the Beit Midrash now. And we need these two verses, both from Bamidbar, from the story of the Sotah, but from late on in the story. And we haven't looked at these verses before. They summarize the whole process, and they say right at the end, Zot Torat HaKanaot, this is the Torah of jealousy, Asher Tistei Isha Tachat Isha, when a wife goes aside, Tachat Isha, does that mean instead of her husband, or does it mean under her husband? Tachat can mean instead of or under. We're not quite sure, but let's just keep that ambiguity in mind. There's some relationship, there's some close relationship with the husband here. Venit ma'an, she's defiled. That's how the Torah summarizes the whole process. And then it goes on to say, actually, we have looked at this verse before, Venikaha ish me'avon, and the man shall be guiltless. And we don't quite understand what this means, but Maimonides is going to comment on it. So let's hold those two ideas in mind, that the wife is instead of or under her husband, and that the man is going to be guiltless. Let's hold those ideas and let's jump into the Mishnah. Arusa v'shomeret yavam lo shota v'lo notelet k'tuba. A betrothed woman and a shomeret yavam. A betrothed woman is someone who's forbidden to any other man, but she's not really married yet. She hasn't entered her husband's house. And a shomeret yavam is in the same kind of situation. This is someone whose husband has deceased. She is potentially married, or she's connected anyway to her brother-in-law, her husband's brother, if she's childless, until she does chalitza. So until she does chalitza, like the woman who's betrothed, she's forbidden to any other man. But she's not really married. And we've said in the verse, all this process of the Sotah applies to a woman with a husband who's married. So the process doesn't seem to apply to her. And this is really what the Mishnah says. So these two categories, they're not properly married yet. Lo shotave lo notelet ketubah, they don't drink and they don't take a ketubah. Shin emar asher tiste isha tachat isha, because the verse says when a woman being, well, I've translated this as being under her husband, tachat isha, so not instead of her husband, but under her husband. When this applies when a woman is with her husband, it doesn't apply elsewhere. And the Mishnah concludes this is a classic language from the halachic midrash, prat la'arusa u'l'shomeret yavam. This language specifically excludes a betrothed woman and a shomeret yavam, i.e. we can learn it out from the verses. And then the Mishnah continues, Amanah l'chohen gadol, a woman who marries a widow who marries a high priest. Well, we know it's a forbidden relationship. The high priest can't marry a widow. Grusha v'chalutza l'kohen edyot, a divorced woman or someone who's done chalitza, who marries a regular priest. We know it's another forbidden relationship. Mamzeret u'nutina liYisrael, a mamzeret or a netina, and a netina, someone who's not Jewish, to a regular Israelite. Uvat Yisrael, mamzer velanatin. An Israelite girl who marries a mamzer or a natin. All these are forbidden relationships. Lo shata velo notelet ketubah. They don't drink and they don't take their ketubah. Now, the fact they don't take their ketubah, we've already learned in the last chapter of ketubot, sorry, the 11th chapter of ketubot, we've learned that these relationships don't take their ketubah. And this seems to be effectively a warning given by the rabbis to women not to enter these forbidden relationships. If you enter this kind of forbidden marriage, you can't kind of take your ketubah when it ends. But why don't they drink? Let's have a look at the Rambam. It's going to be made clear to you that when the husband has another forbidden relationship, higdil be'ilah asura eza isur, if the husband has any kind of forbidden relationship, and now remember the verse, we said the man shall be guiltless. Venikah ha'ish, the verse says, Venikah ha'ish me'avon, the man shall be guiltless of iniquity. How does this mean? How does this read? Well, Maimonides will say the man has to be guiltless of iniquity. If he's had another forbidden sexual relationship, Hamaim hamararim ein osin roshem beishto, then the curse-making waters, these bitter waters, they don't affect his wife. The test doesn't work if the man is not free from sin. That's the observation of the Rambam. We've learned this before, actually, and it'll be clarified in the first Mishnah of the next chapter. But he's telling us now because that's why he says, he's signposting the beginning of the 5th chapter, but he's explaining now why the women involved in these forbidden relationships can't drink, don't drink, because the husband is not free from sin. He's entered a forbidden relationship and the water has no function at all in this situation. The husband has to be free from sin. And then the Mishnah is going to bring us another list, which we've seen before, of women who don't drink. We've always said that the purpose of the water is to resolve uncertainty. So if there's no uncertainty, the water, well, there's no need for the water. So these don't drink, but they don't take their ketubah. Ha'omeret tmea anilach, someone who says, I'm defiled. Well, there's no uncertainty. Veshiba'ula edim shehi tmea, witnesses came to say that she was defiled. Ha'omeret eini shotah, someone who says, look, I refuse to drink. So these women don't drink and they don't take their ketubah. What if the husband is responsible? Ve'amar bala eini mashka. Let's say the husband says, I don't let her drink. What if her husband has a sexual relationship with her on the journey? Well, that's forbidden. He can't do that. So she takes her ketubah, she doesn't drink. She doesn't drink because her husband effectively is preventing her from drinking. But she takes her ketubah because the assumption is that she's innocent here. What if the husband dies? We really don't know. So if the husband dies, well, clearly she can't drink the water because she doesn't have a husband. She's not under her husband. But we don't actually know whether she's innocent or guilty. There we really are left in a state of uncertainty. What are we going to do? Meitu balehen ad shelo yishtu. Their husbands died before they got round to drinking. What are we going to do? Beit Shammai omrem not lok ketubah velo shotot. Beit Shammai say they actually take their ketubah. Clearly, they're not going to drink. Why do they take their ketubah? Well, as far as Beit Shammai is concerned, the execution of the ketubah already moves the property into the domain of the wife. It's her property. And for the heirs to take that property away from her, well, they have to prove that she's guilty. Well, they can't do that. They can't do that. The property remains where it's assumed to be. And Beit Shammai assumes that she has title to the property when the ketubah is executed. So she takes her ketubah. Let's have a look at Beit Hillel. Uveit Hillel omrim lo shotot velo not lot ketubah. Beit Hillel say they don't drink and they don't receive their ketubah. So for Beit Hillel, the ketubah is a claim on the husband's estate. And of course, the rule about a claimant is that they have to establish the right to their claim. So Beit Shammai will say, look, the property is in the hands of the widow, so the heirs have to establish a claim. Beit Hillel would say, no, the property is in the hands of the heirs, and she has to establish a claim. And of course, it's exactly the same result because there's uncertainty, because we can't prove anything either way. If the property is assumed to be in the hands of the heirs, then she cannot establish a claim.